So, welcome to LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. In this show, every Sunday, I try to give you the best, most important clips from the corporate media. I give my commentary, so I try not to take too many clips from other commentators. I try to give you the newsmakers making news on the Sunday shows from all the five major corporate media networks in the United States. That's CNN's State of the Union, ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, CBS's Face the Nation, NBC, MSNBC's Meet the Press, and of course Fox News Sunday. And I'll be showing you clips from all of those sources today, and I wanted to get right to what was the most breaking news, and of course all the clips are going to be on Syria. It looks like from this show. There were a couple other topics discussed. I'll talk a little bit how they got into Benghazi on Fox News Sunday, and even a little bit on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. But I want to start off showing you the breaking news clip. Andrea Mitchell over with Secretary of State John Kerry saying that the United States may consider a delay in any action on Syria and go back to the United Nations, or at least wait for the United Nations weapons inspectors to give their report. And you can see that breaking news in this clip.
Well, Kerry said today that he is picking up a momentum. He said today that the Saudis have actually endorsed airstrikes, but they have not said so publicly. So far, he has no public endorsements of U.S. airstrikes except from the French. And the French said today and yesterday that they now want a delay. They want a delay to go back to the United Nations because they are also, of course, pressured by public opinion here in France. So the Secretary said just now that he is going to take that back to the President, consider a delay, going back to the UN, where you know there is that Russian veto. It does seem to be going one step forward, two steps back, but all of the Arab leaders here today did condemn Assad's use of chemical weapons. Universally, they said that it was Assad, and they condemned it as crossing an international red line. By the way, Kerry picked up a lot of friends here in France by doing an entire speech about Assad, condemning Assad in French to the French people, and in flawless French at that.
So I guess that's a nice little tidbit there about how John Kerry was speaking to the French people in French. But the real news there is it sounds like the United States might at least consider delaying action until there's more UN involvement on Syria. Now, for those of you who've been watching my show every Sunday, you know that I started off somewhat skeptical of this Syrian action. And at the beginning, I was pretty much middle of the road, and last week I was even more skeptical, and I'm pretty much considering making a video now in the upcoming days that'll be titled "Why I Oppose U.S. Airstrikes in Syria and Why It Took Me So Long." But I do want to keep a little open mind through Tuesday night. You know, the President Obama is going to give interviews to all the major networks tomorrow, and then Tuesday night he's going to give a speech to the nation. So even though I think I've pretty much made up my mind, I want to wait at least till Tuesday night to have some sense of open mind while I listen to that speech. But on this breaking news that the United States might consider delaying action to wait for more UN involvement, I want to show Denis McDonough, the chief of staff from the White House. He did the full Ginsburg, went on all 5 shows this morning. That's named after Monica Lewinsky's lawyer, William Ginsburg, who was the first one to ever go on all the Sunday morning shows. Anyway, Denis McDonough did the full Ginsburg this morning, and here's what he said about whether the United States would consider delaying action till the UN weapons inspectors give their report, or there's time for more action in the UN in this clip.
The question comes from the fact that the EU in their statement seem to be indicating we want to see this UN report, that there's the imprimatur of having the UN saying yes, they were used.
It obviously is very important to our friends in Europe and other friends as well. So we've indicated to, as Secretary Kerry said yesterday, we've indicated to our friends that we'll continue to work with them. We'll see what comes out of New York. We're right now focused on Washington, try to get congressional support for this.
Would you wait for the EU report?
Well, right now the timelines seem to work.
report.
Right now the timelines seem to work consistent with one another, but we'll see how this works. The president ultimately is going to make this decision in consultation with Congress on our timeline as best suits our interest.
So it sounds there like there may be some room to wait, or that they were already planning on waiting long enough for the UN inspectors to give their report. And I guess that's a little surprising, because I thought that the Obama administration had kind of given up on the United Nations. Speaking of Denis McDonough doing the full Ginsburg, he said a couple things basically on all 5 shows this morning. I wanted to give you sort of the summary of what those 5 things were, or what those couple things were that he said on the 5 shows. Well, I mean, first the White House released these pictures of victims of the chemical weapons, and they released it to Congress, and then it got released to the press, and that was also shown on all the 5 shows. And White House Chief of Staff Denis McDonough made a definite emotional argument, saying you have to see these pictures and make your decision based on that. And I'll show you sort of an example of that argument in this clip.
This video, the administration showed members of Congress this week in order to make the case for military strikes. It appears to show victims of the August 21st attack by Syrian President Bashar al-Assad that killed more than 1,400 people. Joining me now, the President's Chief of Staff, Denis McDonough. Welcome back to Meet the Press.
Thanks for having me, David.
You have made the statements that these pictures, among other evidence, makes the case to Congress and the American people, and yet Congress doesn't appear to be with you when it comes to military strikes. Why not?
Look, I hope that every member of Congress, before he or she decides how they'll cast their vote, will look at those pictures. Let me tell you what I've been up to for the last couple of weeks, David, talking to members of Congress, dozens of them, including at least 2 of those who will be on your panel. Nobody is rebutting the intelligence. Nobody doubts the intelligence. That means that everybody believes that Bashar al-Assad used chemical weapons against his own people to the tune that you just said of killing nearly 1,500 on August 21st. So the question for Congress this week is, what are the consequences for his having done so? How Congress chooses to answer that question will be listened to very clearly in Damascus, but not just in Damascus,
but you're making
also
the case,
in Tehran and among Lebanese Hezbollah.
So yeah, that is kind of how the argument went from Denis McDonough, the emotional argument based on the pictures, and you can kind of hear the same argument summarized over on This Week with George Stephanopoulos in this clip.
Look, I've been talking to dozens of members of Congress over the last week. Not a single one of them so far has rebutted or refused the intelligence, which is to say everybody agrees that on August 21st, Assad used chemical weapons against his own people. So the question for Congress this week is a very simple one. Should there be consequences for his having used gases, chemical weapons, to kill more than 1,000 of his own people, including more than 400 children? The answer to that question will be followed closely in Tehran. The answer to that question will be followed closely in Damascus. The answer to that question will be followed very closely by members of Lebanese Hezbollah. So this is a big question and a big week for Congress to address that very fundamental national security issue.
So yeah, that's again kind of the summary of the argument that Denis McDonough gave when he went and gave his full Ginsburg on all the shows. He basically used that phrase over and over again about how no one who's seen the briefings has been able to rebut the evidence, and I thought that was kind of a curious phrase. I noticed Justin Amash was over on Face the Nation, and he kind of addressed what that phrase might mean, why he kept using that phrase, and I'll play that clip for you here.
I think nobody rebuts the evidence we've been presented at the briefings, but I would also say that the evidence is not as strong as the public statements that the president and his administration have been making. And I've actually urged the administration in the most recent briefing, for example, to be more forward with the public about what the situation actually is. I think that there are some things that are being embellished in the public statements, and I would ask the administration to be more forward with the public about this, because we all need to have the information. I would also add that the briefings haven't given me comfort. The briefings have actually made me more skeptical about the situation.
Well,
So yeah, that's kind of an interesting take on saying that no one rebuts the evidence, but the evidence isn't exactly what they're saying, and I'm not quite sure what to make of that. But here, let me get my notes open. I gotta switch a couple of the clips here, if you'll. As I've explained on some previous episodes, I can only load up 3 clips at a time, so I have to take little breaks in the middle here to load up the next clips here. Let me. I also wanted to show. I showed that clip there of all the Denis McDonough clips except for one. And I want to show you that last Denis McDonough clip that was over on Fox News Sunday. And as usual, Fox News Sunday had some conspiracy theory that made all of this seem to be Bush's fault. I mean, sorry, not Bush's fault, Obama's fault. That's my Freudian slip, and I'm going to show you a Karl Rove Freudian slip between Bush and Obama in a minute. I'm sorry that I was thinking of the Freudian slip clip, which will which is the one I'm loading up for after that. But I want to show you this whole conspiracy theory that they floated on Fox News about how Obama is setting up Congress to be castigated in the 2014 midterm elections by sending this issue to Congress, and then Denis McDonough's response on Fox News Sunday in this clip.
The president acknowledged on Friday that the White House has done extensive polling on Syria, and you on Tuesday met, and we have it on the screen, with some of the top political advisors, David Plouffe, David Axelrod, Stephanie Cutter, Anita Dunn. And the next day, the president said he didn't set the red line, the world set the red line.
My credibility is not on the line. The international community's credibility is on the line. And America and Congress's credibility is on the line, because we give lip service to the notion that these international norms are important.
If Congress rejects the use of force, will the president blame them for any future atrocities?
Well, let's, Chris, let's not pile hypothetical on top of hypothetical. Here's what's important to consider.
This isn't such a hypothetical. At this point, you're down 10-1 in the House.
In as much as your question started with an if and it followed with 2 other ifs, then
no, there was only one if. If they reject the use of force, will the president blame Congress?
As the definition of a hypothetical. But let me just be clear about what it is that we're talking about here. Irrespective of what we and many in the international community have been clear is a red line, going back now nearly 100 years, with very real consequence for us, Chris. Irrespective of what is very clear a prohibition and a red line, we would be having this debate today in the United States with as a result of what we saw happen on August 21st. As I've indicated to you, nobody is doubting the intelligence. I've consulted with dozens of members of Congress this last week. So the question before us now is, what do we do about it?
Well,
now, we don't intend to have a loss in this vote. So any kind of hypothetical that extends from that position is one that I'm not going to engage in.
Okay.
So there is Denis McDonough, last clip from him going on all the shows, talking about how this isn't a partisan issue, and I don't know, but Karl Rove was also on Fox News Sunday, and while I said I wasn't going to, or I tried to not take clips from commentators, I guess he's a commentator now. But as one of the architects of the terrible Bush policies that are still kind of hanging over this whole process, the whole memories of Iraq that make people so hesitant about getting involved in any kind of Middle East military intervention. Chris Wallace actually asked Karl Rove about this, and first he had this Freudian slip where I'm not sure whether he was trying to say that people applaud what Obama did on Libya, or if he's trying to say people applaud what Bush did on Iraq, but you'll notice he ended up saying that people applaud what Obama did on Iraq. So there was some sort of weird Freudian slip in the middle, and then you'll notice he ends up, instead of blaming the shadow of Iraq for difficulties for going into Syria, he blames lack of leadership from President Obama. What a big surprise. Anyway, you can see it in this clip.
And I know some of the folks watching today are going to say, hey, look, remember what happened in Iraq, where the Bush administration took us to war based on information, intelligence that was widely believed, but that turned out to be false. I have a couple of questions. First of all, how much do you think the Iraq experience has soured this country against any military involvement?
Well, take a look at what happened in Libya. Before President Obama acted in Libya in 2011, the American people were opposed to military action by 35 to 60. After he took action, they were in support of a 54-43. So the American people do have an animus against any kind of action, but if you take action, you're successful. They applauded what President Obama did in Iraq. I think there's something more fundamental here. The President has two sets of issues with members of Congress, and I've spent the last 10 days talking to a lot of Republican members, particularly in the House. One basket of issues are particular issues. Is there a national security interest of the United States at stake? Will we be strengthening? Will we get something worse afterwards? Will we be, in essence, cooperating with Al-Qaeda, as Rand Paul says? And third, what kind of implications will there be for broader U.S. interest in the region after it's over? But you can talk through all three of those issues with members of Congress and come to a place where they could be supportive of the President. But there's another more deeper problem, which is they fundamentally don't trust the President. I've been taken aback by how much they simply do not trust him. Now, this is a bipartisan problem for the President, because it's not just Republicans who distrust him, it's Democrats who are unwilling to be led by him. And not just the, sort of the fringe players like Alan Grayson of Florida. I mean, we're talking about, Udall of Colorado, a sensible, reasonably moderate, very popular back home. He could withstand this vote, but he's not going to go with the President. And it's a sign of the bad relationship the President has with Republicans and Democrats in Congress that he has not been able to rally more support.
So, yeah, there you can see for yourself that Karl Rove is, surprise, surprise, blaming the lack of leadership from President Obama there for his problems with getting approval for this important national security concern. You can also, he mentioned Senator Tom Udall from Colorado. I want to show you a Democrat who looks like he's opposing this vote. There are two clips from Udall here. In the first one, he's, let me see, do I have the right ones here? In the first one, he talks about how there hasn't been enough avenues of, that you have to exhaust all the avenues before you resort to military force. And that's actually one of the things that I've considered in opposing this, that it's kind of like the difference between traditional self-defense and the stand your ground law. Do you have a duty to retreat, or do you have a duty to do everything you can before you use force? And I think both for traditional self-defense for an individual, and also even for a nation, you should try to do everything. And you can see Senator Tom Udall say that hasn't been done in this clip.
My heart is broken when I see that video and you see women and children dying as a result of chemical weapons. So let's be clear on that, and I think it's pretty clear that he did this. But the big question for the Congress right now is, what is the most effective way to move forward? And I think the American people don't want to be embroiled in a Middle Eastern civil war. This is an act of war that we're going to take. We haven't exhausted all of our political economic and diplomatic alternatives, and that's where I want to be focusing.
But Senator,
we ought to be rallying the world. We ought to be rallying the world, because all the world agrees, David, all the world agrees you shouldn't use chemical weapons, and make sure that Russia knows that they're complicit in this. This is what we need to be doing, and Senator, I'm very disappointed that the administration has given up. They have given up on the United Nations and on rallying the world.
Senator, we have
So yeah, I think that is an important point there, that you have to exhaust all avenues. If I were more convinced that the Obama administration had exhausted all avenues before use of force, I might be more willing to support it. And then this thing about getting Russia to vote and going to the UN, I think that would also be an important, hold on, I'm going to do one more after that from... But yeah, here's the second clip from Senator Tom Udall on getting more action from the United Nations before using force in this clip.
What we're talking about is moving much too rapidly down the war path and not trying to find a political solution through the international community. And Russia, we haven't even made them vote. You know, everybody says, well, Russia's going to veto it. They keep saying they haven't seen the intelligence. We ought to show them the intelligence. We ought to take the intelligence to the world. And like has been done in the past at the United Nations and the Security Council, the presentation as to exactly what has happened here and why Russia is complicit in all of this. And I think we have a real chance to move us forward in a very, very positive vein.
All right.
So I think there is some useful, it could be useful to go to the United Nations and get a vote and present the evidence there, and even if the Security Council doesn't end up approving it, and you know, I think if the United States is trying to enforce an international norm, it has to follow international law, and there are a few ways to follow international law here. I saw Representative Loretta Sanchez, who's a Democrat from Orange County, on Meet the Press, say that what I've heard a lot of people say about how there are two ways to validly use force under the United Nations Charter, and I think there's a third way that I'll discuss after I show that clip here.
Well, Kerry said today that he is picking up a momentum. He said today that the Saudis have actually endorsed airstrikes, but they have not said so publicly.
Sorry, that looks like that. I did not get the Loretta Sanchez clip that I wanted to get there, I'm sorry to say, so that ended up getting mislabeled. So I can't show you that Loretta Sanchez clip, but basically they say that they're under the UN Charter, there are the two ways that you can use force is either to get approval of the Security Council or to be acting in self-defense. But I think there's actually a third way under Article 52 where you can act for regional security. And I would, even if the United Nations, even if the United States wasn't acting with the approval of the UN Security Council, I think that might actually be a valid way that's basically what the United States used in Kosovo when the United Nations Security Council wouldn't approve it because Russia wouldn't, but acted with NATO in the region. And if the U.S. could get like the Arab League or some kind of additional allies acting, then I might also be more. I might be more willing to support what President Obama is asking for. I just don't actually believe they're going to do that. And I also want to show you a few clips from Senator Rand Paul, who was also over on Fox News Sunday. And he talked about why he is a big opponent, kind of leading the opposition. And I want to show you those three clips from Fox News Sunday. First, he talked about the possibility of this delay with the the breaking news that the French have asked for a delay to go through the United Nations, and here's Rand Paul's reaction to that in this clip.
Secretary of State Kerry says that the the administration will consider the French suggestion to go back to the UN Security Council and wait for the weapons inspection report there. Would that change your mind?
Well, I think it's a better route. The thing is at the Security Council, we butt heads with Russia and China all the time. We have to figure out how to get them on our side. Russia has said repeatedly that they're against chemical weapons use, and they've signed the treaty to ban. So I think really if we could convince them that this was perpetrated by Assad, and if the Russians and the Chinese and the Security Council were on our side, it could potentially change the outcome here.
But as
So there you can see that my microphone a little loud. You can see there that Rand Paul is saying that he might be convinced if they went through the UN, especially getting Russia's endorsement, but that doesn't really seem very likely. And he also talked about one of the big talking points that you hear from people on the right wing of the Republican Party is that this whole thing is the United States is actually going to be helping Al-Qaeda. That's sort of like the cheap talking point, and I'll show you in a minute. I'll show you a Republican who actually stood up for it being a cheap talking point. But
Congressman Adam Kinzinger, an Iraq War vet.
First, before I do that, I want to show you Rand Paul sort of making the cheap talking point that this is the U.S. supporting Al-Qaeda in this clip.
You know, the most difficult obstacle they have to overcome is that if we go in on the side of the rebels, we'll be going in on the side of Al-Qaeda. And most of us think we've been fighting Al-Qaeda for 10 or 12 years now. So it's a hard obstacle, or a big obstacle to overcome. They may overcome it in the Senate if it becomes a partisan vote. Everybody's trying to say this isn't Iraq, but it also isn't a good situation when we're going in allied to Al-Qaeda. I don't know if it'll pass in the House, though. I really have my doubts about whether it passes in the House.
And yeah, that last part, I think, even though I've predicted passage, and I still think it's about 50-50 passage in the House now, but as I'll show you, the vote count isn't looking good, but there's still some moves the White House can make, so I still think there's about a 50-50 chance it will pass the House, and a significantly better chance it will pass the Senate. But on that whole the U.S. fighting on the side of Al-Qaeda, the other person who's been using that line a lot is Senator Ted Cruz, who's another Tea Party candidate who's probably running for president in 2016. And he was sort of upbraided by this Republican congressman who's an Iraq war veteran, and I'll show a clip from him in a little bit. But they showed a clip from him to Ted Cruz on This Week with George Stephanopoulos and got his reaction here.
And Congressman Adam Kinzinger, an Iraq war vet, has also taken exception to your comments. Here's what he said.
They say that if we go in and we strike Assad, that we are acting as, quote, Al-Qaeda's Air Force. And I believe that is a cheap line by some people to garner headlines.
Cheap line to garner headlines.
Well, look, I don't know Mr. Kinzinger. I certainly respect his service. He's entitled to his opinions. What I can tell you is that actual line initially was said by Denis Kucinich, and where I saw it after that was a current Navy naval sailor who tweeted and said, I didn't sign up to serve as Al-Qaeda's Air Force. And the reason why we're seeing, and I'll tell you, this past 2 weeks I've been traveling all across Texas, and everywhere in the state of Texas, it has been unanimous of Texans saying, don't put us in the middle of a sectarian civil war, particularly when doing so would help Al-Qaeda terrorists.
Finally, do you think that...
So yeah, that's Senator Ted Cruz kind of echoing the argument from Senator Rand Paul, showing the Tea Party right-wing argument against this war, that it's not so much that they're against war. They don't have a problem with war, but they have a problem with this Obama administration helping Al-Qaeda. And there had been some talk that Rand Paul might actually filibuster, but it doesn't sound like he's going to, and he addressed that question over on Fox News Sunday. I want to show you that clip here.
Well, the filibuster can delay temporarily a vote, but it cannot put a vote off forever. It can be used to get something you want, and so filibustering to try to get an amendment to a bill is sometimes worthwhile. Filibustering to try to get information from the administration is worthwhile, but can't ultimately defeat the resolution. I will insist that there is full debate on this, and I will insist that I get an amendment, and my amendment will say that the vote is binding, that the president cannot, if we vote him down, decide to go to war anyway. That's the way I interpret the Constitution, and I will insist on at least one vote where we try to say, hey guys, this is not political show, this is not constitutional theater, this is a binding vote.
Well, let me...
So it doesn't sound like there's going to be a filibuster, but that's actually an interesting addition to the resolution for use of force that has legal implications. You know, I talked last week about how the president probably, based on court decisions from Clinton's bombing of Kosovo, where there was like a 213 vote in the House of Representatives, so it didn't pass to authorize his bombing of Kosovo that was already ongoing at the time of the vote. And some Republicans in Congress took that to the Federal District Court of Appeals, and the court found they didn't have standing to object to the use of force because there was no like final decision by Congress to oppose it. They hadn't cut off funding. They hadn't even passed a resolution prohibiting force. They just hadn't passed one that supported the use of force. So that amendment that Senator Rand Paul is thinking about there, or trying to get added to the resolution, might make it more binding on the president not to use force if he doesn't get congressional authorization, or at least might set up a new kind of court case on the issue, going beyond what happened with Clinton and Kosovo. So I wanted to show you those clips from Rand Paul, but it wasn't just over on Fox News that they had some attacks on Obama. I was kind of interested to see how over on ABC's This Week, they really kind of played up this idea that Chris Wallace on Fox News Sunday was talking about last week, that this is a big turning point for the Obama administration, and if Obama doesn't get congressional authorization, he'll be like a lame duck, and his presidency is basically over. And I want to show you first the introduction on ABC's This Week kind of presented the same argument that you can see in this clip.
Good morning and welcome to This Week. White House in crisis.
I knew this was going to be a heavy lift.
Obama's high-stakes Syria gamble failing fast. Can he salvage a win? Can his presidency survive a defeat? What will it mean for America's security and our role in the world?
So yeah, that's like the first part of ABC advocating or showing that argument that this is like Obama's presidency on the line, and you can see George Stephanopoulos even more explicitly after the intro making the same point here.
Hello again. It wasn't even on the agenda 1 month ago, but now the vote to use military force in Syria has become the most critical test of the Obama presidency. The stakes are high. America's security and credibility on the line. So is the balance of power between the president and Congress and the rest of Obama's agenda in his second term. And right now, it's a vote the president would lose. ABC's whip count in the House shows 229 members likely in the no camp. Only 44 are likely to vote yes.
So yeah, there they are setting up as like a big dramatic turning point in the presidency, and also you can see the whip count there makes it look like it's just not going to happen. And different there were different people talking about whether Obama has a chance to convince anyone with this. You know, like I said, tomorrow he's talking to all the networks, and then Tuesday he's giving this speech to Congress. Let me just load up the next few clips here real quick. The first one I'm going to show is from Republican Congressman Justin Amash, who I didn't mention before, but he is his famous Amash amendment almost cut off funding to the NSA and almost passed the House of Representatives with like 6 or 12 votes. I can't remember. It was like a 12 vote. If there had been 6 votes different, it wouldn't have failed. So I thought that was. I want to show what he said about how nothing that President Obama could say would really convince him that he's going to change his mind and support any strikes on Syria in this.
Thank you very much for bringing your perspectives to us this morning. Congressman Amash, you have been one of the more vocal opponents from the beginning of any action. Is there anything that the administration or the president could say on Tuesday night that would cause you to say, well, maybe I better go ahead and support him and vote to give him the Congress to give him the authority to go ahead?
It's highly doubtful. I've been to the briefings. I spent a lot of time with my constituents, and there's overwhelming disapproval for this war. I can't think of a reason right now, based on the objectives that the administration has laid out, based on the strategy they've laid out, I can't come up with a reason right now why the United States should support this action.
So yeah, that's Justin Amash there saying that there's really nothing that the president could say. And I also want to show you Elijah Cummings, who is a Democrat who doesn't seem to be supporting this, saying that the president is kind of held to a higher standard. I will show you that clip here.
But keep in mind too, Bob, I do believe that this president is being held to a higher standard in other with regard to going into using force in another nation, and the reason being Iraq. Most of my constituents tell me, look, we just spent $1 trillion in Iraq. Our young people died and were injured, and you know, they just don't want to see that again. And then they say, for what?
So yeah, I think that is actually one of the reasons that President Obama is having such a hard time, despite what Karl Rove said in that earlier clip I showed. I think that the shadow of Iraq is hanging over all this, and it's not Iraq. And I didn't want to approach it as being like Iraq, because there are a lot of differences. But oh, and I think I had. Well, I'll show you another clip about the Iraq situation. But first, I also want to show you a clip of a Democrat who actually is becoming more convinced. This isn't the way I'm going, and I haven't seen a lot of people who are saying that they're getting more convinced when they hear the briefings or the whole congressional process is making people more convinced. I think I just showed you that whip count a couple clips back that shows that there aren't very many people who are committed. But here is Delaware Senator Chris Coons saying that he actually has been more convinced both by the briefings and by the congressional process in this clip.
As a member of the Foreign Relations Committee who came back last week to participate in a number of classified briefings, I think it was vital for me to move to a place of support. First, that we had intelligence briefings that answered my questions and my skepticism about whether or not the Assad regime was responsible. But second, that we amended the resolution. I would not have supported it as it initially came over from the White House, but the Foreign Relations Committee in the Senate acted this past week to narrow it so that it was clear, no boots on the ground, limited in terms of scope, and limited in terms of purpose. As you've heard from Denis McDonough and the administration, there's now clarity. This is about deterring another chemical weapons use by Assad.
So there are some Democrats who are supporting this. I also want to show you a Republican who's supporting it, Adam Kinzinger, who I showed earlier, saying it was like a short clip where he was criticizing Senator Ted Cruz about we're going to be Al-Qaeda's Air Force. And he's like an Iraq war veteran who takes the whole chemical weapons attack thing seriously. And I want to, I'll show another clip about that in a minute. I saw a lot of what I think is misinformation about why chemical weapons were used. And I have never really been able to figure that out until I saw this analysis from Chris Hayes on MSNBC last Wednesday when he gave his analysis of why he's come out against the strikes in Syria. and I'll get to that in a minute. But first I want to show this Republican Adam Kinzinger talking about the whole chemical weapons issue, and as an example of a Republican who does support strikes on Syria in this clip.
35. I think the point to make is everybody's under this impression that this is the very first time a red line has ever been put out on chemical weapons. We haven't faced chemical weapons since World War I on the battlefield for a reason. In Desert Storm, President George H.W. Bush sent a letter through Tariq Aziz to Saddam Hussein basically saying, if you use chemical weapons, we're going to use anything at our disposal, including nuclear weapons, basically. We created a northern and a southern no-fly zone over Iraq for 12 years because of our absolute disdain for the use of chemical weapons. If we don't enforce this red line today, how are we ever going to enforce it in the future when we let this thing slide?
The answer?
So yeah, I think there are a couple problems with Adam Kinzinger's argument, Representative Kinzinger's argument there. First, the whole idea there at the end that the reason that we set up the no-fly zones and had our war in Iraq was to stop the use of chemical weapons. Well, that's just ridiculous. If you look down in the video description, maybe you have to click on see more, but I put the same link I put in last week to this the Foreign Policy magazine article showing that the United States was complicit in Saddam Hussein's use of chemical weapons, at least his use in the Iran-Iraq war, maybe not so much in his use on his own people in the 90s, but in the 80s in the Iran-Iraq war, we were definitely complicit, and that was not really the reason for the Iraq war. I think the real reason that chemical weapons aren't used is because they're just not very good weapons. They go depending on where the wind blows, and you can't really target your enemies very well because of that, and they're just a lot more effective weapons. But I also want to show another Republican, Mike Rogers, who also is supportive. He's the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, and he talked about, I disagree with what he says at the beginning about how the chemical weapons were used tactically, or though maybe politically, as I'll get to in a minute. But then he talks about this proxy war thing. Well, I'll talk to here first. You can see. I'll talk about it after I show the clip from Mike Rogers here.
When you look at all our national security interests, that first bit being, how do we make sure that chemical weapons that have been used, and by the way, this is a pattern of use over a year. This was not the first time. No intervention caused a greater scale of use, and they're using it to their political and tactical advantage, including killing civilians. They believe that helps them. That's why we got here. So what we need to do is say, listen, why don't we empower the president so that we have the credibility for a negotiated settlement? We should stop talking about limited actions and how this works, and nobody's, by the way, is calling for massive military intervention. It wouldn't work. It would be bad for our national security interests. But right now, we, the United States of America, doesn't have the credibility to go to the opposition and say, stop shooting. We're going to negotiate with Assad for 2 weeks on bringing this to a conclusion and getting him out of power. That's one great way we have to protect the chemical and conventional weapons. So what we ought to do as members of Congress is have a thorough debate about all of the levels of our national security interest. That first, as we said, chemical weapons and conventional weapons. If that spreads throughout the Levant and gets into Europe, we are going to pay a heavy price. The next level up, Iran. They have been a bad actor here. They're using it as a proxy war. This is beyond a Syrian civil war. It's a proxy war. You have Hezbollah troops fighting on behalf of Assad at Iran's direction. You have the Russians there providing military assistance, and I argue military hardware and military goods. All of that stirring a pot that says if we don't find a solution here, that means having credibility to find that solution, which may mean military strikes, this thing is going to descend even further out of control.
Well, I mean, that last part about what he said about this turning into a proxy war, or that at least this is more of a regional war and there are a lot of different players involved, that I actually kind of agree with, but I think that actually argues in favor of going to the United Nations, or even if the United Nations Security Council won't support some kind of action, at least getting some sort of regional allies, the Arab League, and explicit support from various players in the region, and as I said, that actually gives support under international law. And if the Obama Article 52, if you look that up, of the UN Charter, but without that, I think that the Obama administration hasn't set up enough support. And this whole idea that chemical weapons were used for some advantage by Bashar Assad, that has never really made any sense to me, because I was saying earlier, I think they're just not very effective weapons. And one idea as to why Assad used the chemical weapons that I saw from Chris Hayes on All In with Chris Hayes, which is a great show that plays right after Rachel Maddow on MSNBC on weeknights and I watch it every chance I get because it has really great analysis. And if I do make a video talking about why I now oppose U.S. airstrikes on Syria and why it took me so long, I'm going to use a couple clips from that. And I want to show what Chris Hayes said about why Assad used chemical weapons in Syria that's different from what I've heard just about anywhere else in this clip.
If Assad did in fact use chemical weapons, and you'll excuse me if the experience of Iraq makes me a wee bit reluctant to definitively state he did based solely on U.S. intelligence. But again, if Assad, as the evidence would seem to suggest, did use these weapons, then he likely did so as a way of basically burning the bridge that could have let him retreat. In other words, he sent a message to supporters that the only way out is through, that he will fight to the end, and all the people included in his coalition of support, Syrian Christians, Alawites, members of the military and business elite, they are in the same bunker with him. If the rebels win, the family members of the people Assad gassed will not look kindly on his supporters. Given the fact that Assad's fighting literally for his life, I'm not quite sure a targeted punitive strike like the one being proposed will have that much of an effect. It may slightly alter the calculation of deploying such weapons again. But even if it does, if Assad thinks he has to use chemical weapons to win, or lose and find himself drawn and quartered, guess what he's going to do?
So yeah, that's that analysis. I hadn't heard or thought of that before, but as the real motivation for why Assad used chemical weapons, that he did it because there's international norm against them. Basically, over on All In with Chris Hayes, the argument is this is the signal that Bashar Assad has gone all in on the conflict, that there's not going to be a negotiated settlement, that he's not going to surrender, that he's basically turned himself into a war criminal, and that everyone has to fight to the bitter end. And that also shows why I think this limited military strike is not really the best way to go. I think if there were more of an international coalition, I might reassess my position, but that was a really key analysis I hadn't really thought of till I saw that last Wednesday, or from last Wednesday's show. I want to show a couple quick other clips before I finish up. First, one of the other kind of breaking news pieces here is Charlie Rose got an interview with Bashar Assad. And I'm going to watch President Obama's argument, but I also want to watch this on the Charlie Rose show tomorrow night and see what Assad has to say for himself. Not that I really, I don't think there's going to be any real surprises there. But I want to show you a couple quick clips talking about sort of the Syrian point of view that kind of made it into the corporate media here in the United States. First here is Charlie Rose over on CBS's Face of the Nation talking to Bob Schieffer about what Assad told him is from his point of view on the whole situation in this clip.
Well, he denied that he had anything to do with the attack. He denied that he knew, in fact, that there was a chemical attack, notwithstanding what has been said and notwithstanding the videotape. He said there's not evidence yet to make a conclusive judgment. He would not say, even though I read him a lead paragraph of the New York Times today in a story about their chemical weapons supply, and he said, I can't confirm or deny that we have chemical weapons. He did, however, say that if, in fact, we do have them, and I'm not going to say yes or no, they're in centralized control, so No one else has access to them. He suggested, as he has before, that perhaps the rebels had something to do with it. He made some references to Aleppo. The most important thing is he basically says there has been no evidence that I use chemical weapons in against my own people, and that there is no evidence of that. And if, in fact, the administration has evidence, then they should show that evidence and make their case. I then obviously repeated the fact that Secretary Kerry is in the process of making the case, and that, in fact, that information is being shown to members of Congress as they begin to come back to Washington and consider an authorization for the president to make a military strike. He said that he did not necessarily know whether there was going to be a strike, obviously, that they were as prepared as they could be for a strike. He said there would be, suggested there would be, among people that are aligned with him, some kind of retaliation if a strike was made, that would be, what would be, but he would not even talk about any kind of the nature of the response.
So, yeah, that's the pretty... Charlie Rose talked about some more things about Assad's point of view, and I'm interested to see the whole interview on the Charlie Rose show on PBS tomorrow night. But that wasn't very surprising. Assad is denied involvement in the chemical attacks, and maybe even that chemical weapons attacks took place at all. He's said that there will be retaliation. And then the part that I cut out right after that, Charlie Rose said, and Assad said, call your congressman. Told the American people, call your congressman. Tell them you've had a lot of bad experiences in the Middle East. Don't go in again. So it is a little disturbing, some of the people who I agree with when I say that I'm opposing the Syrian airstrikes. But just because I agree with Assad doesn't necessarily mean that I'm wrong, I guess, in this part. And actually, CBS's Face the Nation also had another journalist trying to give the Syrian side of the argument. You don't get a lot of that in the American media, but they had Elizabeth Palmer, who's been in Damascus, sort of talking about the moderates in the city of Damascus, how the whole military problem has gotten rid of any sort of possible political opposition, and I'll show you that in this clip.
You know, Bob, one of the really saddest things about this civil war is that it's pretty much silenced the Democratic opposition here in the Capitol. 2 years ago, when the demonstrations were on, people thought they might be getting a choice between the dictatorship of President Bashar al-Assad and something better. Well, that's no longer the case. We've got assassinations, bombings, fighting on the very doorstep of Damascus. People now think they have a choice between Bashar al-Assad and something much worse. And that's certainly what Syrian state media hammers away at them every day. There are al-Qaeda fighters on the outskirts of the city waiting to rush in and kill you all in your beds. So people are really afraid, especially the millions of Christians and Alawites, the minorities here. They think that American military strikes might be the green light for a rebel offensive that would turn the city into a bloodbath. So they're really hoping and feeling very fearful and hoping that President Obama will find an alternative to military strikes as a way of responding to those chemical attacks.
So yeah, there is CBS's Face the Nation giving you a little insight into what I'm not sure who that reporter's talking to. It sounds like sort of like Syrian elites in Damascus who oppose Bashar al-Assad, maybe, but also as sort of directed by the government media. And so I don't know, that's kind of the Syrian perspective, and I think those are all the clips I want to show you on the whole Syrian situation. I did leave out a couple other clips that I thought I might use. There was a big argument between Karl Rove and Juan Williams over on Fox News Sunday about whether the whole Benghazi scandal was a scandal, whether it was over, and Brit Hume was on there, and of course Juan Williams, who isn't all that liberal himself these days, was like the one liberal there saying that the whole story's over, and he got laughed at by Brit Hume and attacked by Karl Rove. But I just couldn't bring myself to do more on the Benghazi scandal, although over on ABC's This Week they actually had this the top diplomat below the ambassador who was killed in Benghazi, talking about how he didn't think it was handled correctly, and he thought the cavalry was going to come. And so I don't know. That's coming up. This September 11th is the 1-year anniversary of the attack on the consulate in Benghazi in Libya. So that may be coming up. I'm hoping, like I said, to make my own video why I oppose U.S. airstrikes in Syria and why it took me so long. And that may be answering some of your questions. It's going to be kind of a tight schedule because I want to wait and listen to Obama's speech on Tuesday before I completely make up my mind. Well, on Wednesday, I'm actually giving a talk locally here in Sacramento on loss of civil liberties after September 11th, because Wednesday is the anniversary of September 11th. And I may get that a video recording of that I will upload to my channel for those who are interested. I'll mostly probably just be talking about NSA spying. And then Thursday I have to go to San Francisco for the ACLU monthly meeting there. So I don't know exactly, maybe till Friday till I get up my video about why I oppose the Syrian strike. But I want to go into the comments section and see if I can get a little live discussion going in the last few minutes here before I sign off. I see I have about 85 or 100 people and over 100 comments here from people. So let me see if I can find some good on-topic comments on Syria. Let's see. No more wars from... there have been a lot of my friends on the left are much more reflexively anti-war than I am, and I think I've even lost some subscribers because I took some time to come up with my position opposing the Syrian strike, and that's why I want to make this video about why I oppose the strike on Syria and why it took me so long. And I can give you sort of a quick preview here that why I'm not so reflexively anti-war is that I've seen some, I graduated college in 1991 after I was an undergraduate for about 7 years, and right when I came out of college and I had just studied military history and strategy, some of the military actions that the United States took were like the action in Kosovo that I thought was ended up being a good action. Oh, and then the first George H.W. Bush's Gulf War. I saw a lot of the experts there say that was going to be a long and bloody conflict and be like a quagmire that the U.S. wasn't going to get out of, and they all turned out to be wrong, or at least they seem to turn out to be wrong, unless you consider the second Iraq War to be sort of a continuation of the first Iraq War, and in some ways that's true, and I don't know. Anyway, and then I also, one of the things I always think about when I think about military action is Rwanda, which was also in the 90s, and how we didn't act there. And so looking at how people overestimated how bad the first Iraq, the Gulf War, the George H.W. Bush war in Iraq, people overestimated how bad that was going to be, and was like the 100-hour war. And then the successful use of force in Kosovo, and then the lack of use of force in Rwanda. Those are kind of the things I think of that make me a little slow to say, to be reflexively no to any use of military force. Well, I know a lot of the people who are my viewers, the first thing they think of is Iraq, and I think of that too, but I don't think this is a lot like Iraq. So it took me a while to come to this position, but let's see. Analytical failure asks, LiberalViewer, if the Obama administration is so sure the Syrian government is responsible for this attack and they want Congress to approve it, why don't they show the public hard proof? Well, some of it is going to be classified, but I think that you're going to see more of it come out in the president's speech and in his interviews with all the networks in the next couple days. I think we're going to see some of the evidence, but I don't think that the evidence, at least for me, the evidence that Assad is responsible for the chemical attack is not what the big stumbling block is for me. The big stumbling block for me is that I don't think this action is going to be effective, and I think that if it were going to be effective, it would have to be more of international action, not necessarily approved by the UN Security Council, but at least with more allies from the region and having gone through the UN process. Let me see, I have a time for a couple more questions here. Let me see if I can find any couple of... Oh, well, Sandai26 says, does LiberalViewer support Syrian intervention? I think I've answered that, saying that although it's taken me kind of a long time, I think I've come out to the position opposing it, although I'm going to wait Tuesday night to listen to President Obama's speech. You know, a lot of people think that's kind of silly, and I know a lot of people don't trust anything Obama says, but I like to listen to the arguments. And I pretty much made up my mind, but I am going to try to keep an open mind through Tuesday night. Let me see, I have time for one or two more questions here. Let me, as I scroll up here. It looks like you're starting to argue with each other. Didim222 says we should just invade the entire Middle East and take it over for the oil. Yeehaw! Well, I mean, I think there is definitely an oil motivation. That's what I thought was kind of disingenuous about what that Republican Representative Adam Kinzinger said about how we went into Iraq to show our disapproval for Iraq's use of chemical weapons. I think that is not a really honest analysis of why we went into Iraq. I think it had more to do with oil, and especially the first Gulf War, that was all about Kuwaiti oil and like giving the monarchs in Kuwait their sovereignty over the oil back. So yeah, let me check this out. If I just a couple of people arguing about whether this is working, about whether the video and the audio is working. I hope it's working for you. So anyway, I've been going for an hour now. That's about as far as I want to go. I appreciate all of you who have signed in and watched. It looks like looks like I have between 80 and 100 people for most of the show, so I appreciate all of you for watching. I'm going to try to make that video over the coming week, tentatively titled Why I Opposed U.S. Airstrikes in Syria and Why It Took Me So Long. And like I said, I'm giving this talk on Wednesday on the anniversary of September 11th about loss of civil liberties after September 11th, probably just discussing all the NSA spying. So I should be uploading that later this week as well. So look forward to those videos, and I hope you have a good rest of your weekend, or a good beginning of your week for my European viewers. And thank you again for joining me. I hope you found it informative and enjoyed the clips that I picked out for you this week. Thanks for joining me for LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup, Syria Edition 2.